Hello friends, Jennifer Pearson here, Thistle Gypsy, and I decided to do a reading about my relationship to authority. Now, I don't think of myself as having an authority problem and an authority issue. To some extent I do, but not where I feel like I need to automatically challenge authority. But I also don't necessarily automatically accept authority either. I'm a questioner. And I do object to anybody who poo-poos my questions and doesn't respond to them on the basis of their own authority. But because the Emperor and the King of Swords have been coming up just here very recently regarding some interesting questions, and I think kind of some important questions. So I decided that prompted me to look into my relationship with authority, to see what there is to see to what extent that is an issue. And I'm not only looking at my relationship to other people having authority over me so much as, or I should say, but also including when I am the authority. If I have problems when I am the authority. And yeah, so let's take a look. This is the Everyman Tarot. It's not the prettiest deck in the world, but despite all of the chakra colors here, it is, it can be really accurate. I do appreciate this deck. All right, so my first question is simply, what is my relationship to authority, or with authority? What is my relationship with authority? And I'm going to pull 3 cards for that, and then I'm going to do 1 card for my relationship when someone else is in authority over me, and my relationship to authority when I am the authority. So, well, I wouldn't have expected the Ace of Cups to come up anywhere in here, but there it is. Okay. You know, the thing that is easiest for me is this, which is that I'm generally a pretty law-abiding person. I'm happy to have laws, and it just struck me also that I am willing to accept laws well, now I kind of lost it. Yeah, but there was something reciprocal there, but I've kind of lost it. Oh, because I have a strong sense of justice myself. So I guess that, you know, the whole kind of social justice thing. So I see kind of the background. And so I accept. I find our legal system kind of a pain in the butt, but I understand kind of what's behind the veil, you might say. And that maybe there needs to be more behind the veil, more philosophy, or, you know, right conduct toward others. And so I am usually happy to let this go. In terms of not challenging our justice system too much outside of the political way that you would challenge it to get it to change. So these 2 cards are curious, though. And in this particular deck, this person who inhabits the world of the swords, he wears glasses normally, and so his glasses here are on the ground. And I could see this representing, it's like if we're talking about the justice system, you could say that I want to get along, if you want to take it that way. I wouldn't say that I love it, and I definitely would not say that I love authority in general. I would say just the opposite. Maybe this represents, that I wish we would just all get along. that mythical, unicorny state of feeling, that I wish we could just all get along. Or maybe it's saying that I wish that authority could be based solely on love or something like that. But I wouldn't say that I love it. So this is an interesting card to come up. And the dark blue is really hitting me, like the whole third eye thing. In terms of chakras, it's a really dark indigo blue. And here you have the throat chakra blue up here. I get it now. Because I was just thinking, well, this blue here is almost a purple color, like a really deep purple, and then you have the darker. So it's almost like you've got the throat chakra, and this would be the third eye, and all of this here, this stuff, is actually crown chakra. And look, of course, it's coming out at the top of the cup. So crown chakra. So it's like higher justice or higher authority. Boy, that took some time, didn't it? So, yeah, a matter of higher authority. That my expectation is that any authority down here on earth is in harmony somehow with a higher authority. But this speaks of to me, this speaks to some extent of denial. That's the word that's coming to mind. Denial, or being like the ostrich that sticks its head in the sand kind of a thing. Not wanting to look, not wanting to see things. And since this is a general question here, what is my relationship to authority? Each of these could represent something different. So this could be a denial, or not wanting to face even my own authority, or not wanting to wield or hold authority, and how that ends up binding me up. And again, this could be the social justice aspect. And again, the fact that I'm not an anarchist. I believe that that it's appropriate to have laws and a legal system, and try to have as little to do with it as possible by obeying reasonable laws. And this is, I think, just the acknowledgement of higher authority. Not in the sense of a god or goddess, or anything like that, but a higher connection. And again, it's still a really interesting card to come up, even if, with that interpretation, because I don't even think about that a lot of times. So it's curious reading. All right, so this card is my relationship with authority when someone else is the authority. And it's kind of funny because it's like to get them to shut up. um, Again, it isn't the card I would have necessarily expected to come up. To me, this is like, what comes to mind is the word pacify, to pacify the authority, which I don't think is actually the most positive relationship to have with it. And by pacify, I don't think it's acquiesce so much as to kind of the maybe dismissive isn't quite the right word, but like a dismissive nod, like, oh, okay, right, sure, alrighty. I understand that that's the way you see things. Fine. Um, but it can also be a matter of, if you think of authority like this lion in terms of the authority being defensive and thus feeling a need to assert itself, then to pacify it, and usually this figure is earthly but wearing all white in a somewhat angelic sense. So a matter of helping the authority figure or the authority organization or whatever to see well, I would say this, to correct itself when it's not acting out of the higher good. So I would say this in terms of that, you know, holding it in check. That, which is interesting. It's like, because it really is like putting myself above it and seeing it as something to be held in check, which of course is part of the, you know, worked into the Constitution and the way the government works. You have the checks and balances. And to me, this also indicates that there's more than one level of authority. There's the on the street level of authority, and then there's a higher level of authority that is supposed to be the basis for this and to hold this in check. So it's all a little more sophisticated than I was expecting. All right, so how about my relationship to authority when I am the authority? Ouch. So, I think these are probably related. And here again, the glasses are off. They're actually in his hand this time. And here even the sky looks a little bit raw here. So it's going to sound like lighter language than this might deserve, but to me it's like being an authority is a bother. That too much comes at me, that I get overwhelmed and can't deal with, and so I end up maybe not stabbed to death, but passed out. I would have thought like the Eight of Cups might have been certainly a gentler card, but but maybe it's not more accurate. So you could say this easily, that since this is my attitude about me being an authority, that when you're an authority, you're more likely to be either under attack, if that is my assumption, or if we view the swords as maybe problems that people throw at you, decisions that you have to make, which is all true when you're in a position of authority. Um, you have to be able to make quick decisions or you end up like this. And of course, if you're the boss, everybody's bringing their problems to you. Some people that they find that stimulating and validating. This is how I see it. And I've been aware, not quite to this extent. This is kind of extreme, but I have really not wanted authority, and certainly it has held me back in my career because I don't go into larger organizations generally. I'm not interested in being over other people particularly. Coordinating other people, yes. Being the authority, being the one in charge, no. And from what I've seen of, other people when they are in that position, I don't envy them. A lot of people are resentful of others in higher positions. It's like, kind of from what I've seen, it's like, I'll pass on that. I'll pass on that. I'm glad somebody else wants that job because I don't. And just like anybody else in the world, there are times when I see people who are in authority that shouldn't be in authority, and I realize that even if this were how I dealt with the authority, it would be better than some other people who deal with it. The world is, and I don't know why they do it, but people who are bad bosses, and I don't know if they don't realize it or if they realize it and they don't care. I don't know. So I decided I wanted to try another deck. I was just curious, but I think that the Everyman Tarot just did a fantastic job of kind of calling some things out there and looking at it in a more sophisticated way than I was expecting from this reading. But I wanted to drag out my Dark Mansion Tarot and see what it came up with as well. So let's take a look. The Six of Cups. Temperance. So to me, this Temperance, I see this almost as similar to the Strength card in this situation. But I'm going to... Oh, and the King of Cups. So much Cups energy. This might, because we have the past here and the King of Cups and reminiscence, this might actually be indicating a, it's funny, I would never have thought of this as like a past lives deck, but it's suddenly, or like a mediumship deck, but that I'm suddenly getting that feeling from this deck. But I don't think that's what this is indicating. I think it's talking specifically about my relationship with my father. In other words, and since it's cups, it's little happy reminiscences, and the King of Cups. And I don't know that I would normally characterize my father as the King of Cups, but he would have been my past authority figure. I don't know who else would fit this combination of cards. And so if the question is, what is my relationship to authority? It's saying that it's not a bad relationship because, and it's kind of, I would take the Temperance as meaning even-tempered, maybe. Maybe seeing the exchange that happens between the individual and the authority figure as one that is reciprocal, because you do have the pouring of the things together. So the way you get along with authority is determined as much by your attitude as by the attitude of the authority figure. That it's, I would say this, that it's a negotiation that's going on, and that this comes from my relationship with parents. And kind of what I was just talking about here with the temperance is kind of how my parents, actually more my mother than my father, tended to deal with issues when we were kids. She often, more so than many other parents, would hear you out. She would hear you out. And sometimes she would hear you out and say, okay, fine, but these are the rules. And this is what we're doing, you know, despite your plea or your version of reality. That's we're having to go by the parental way. And you know, if you see the King of Cups as somebody who is, I don't know that lenient is the right word, but and compromise isn't quite the right word, but when you maybe it is compromise, you know, not compromise in the sense of you cannot, and again we're talking about childhood here, so you know you cannot go to see so and so now. You cannot go spend the night at so and so's house tonight or whatever, but we can talk about it next week, you know. So in other words, not the kind of thing where something is offered or an explanation is offered. So it's not just, you know, you're not going over there. Just, you know, get out of my face. You know, it's not that kind of authority. Okay, so let's see my relationship when someone is in authority over me. So this is another card that I think could be interpreted in a variety of ways. But if this is the authority figure, then I would see this as all of my questions that I would tend to throw at them if I was questioning their authority. It would be like that. This could also, you know, I do engage in marches and gatherings regarding social justice. And so this could be that collective action when I feel that authority is not acting correctly, especially a higher authority. And so what was this, my relationship when someone else is in authority? So now that I'm seeing it as this being the authority and this is me, it's hard for me to see it again as, okay, but I can. So if somebody else is the authority, yes, I will stand up to authority at times. Then this is mostly, I think of this mostly in terms of doctors. When I feel like I'm not being heard, or something is being dismissed, or something doesn't add up for me in terms of what they're telling me, I will swing back. I will swing back at them, and I will challenge them and say you're not taking X into account. But which I think has been vital for me in terms of managing my health, as opposed to just saying, okay, sure, I will take this, or I won't take that, or you can ignore this. And it's like, no. Ah. So the Everyman Tarot gave me the 10 of Swords, and the Dark Mansion Tarot gives me the 5 of Cups for when I am the one in authority. Yep. I get overwhelmed. And I just can't take it. I love those 3 little candle sconces there. So yeah, it's interesting because so clearly my attitude toward holding authority and is not very positive. You know, a queen has not come up for that, for this question. A major arcana card, which would at least indicate some level of a sense of power, has not come up. And it's all kind of interesting because, you know, when I was teaching, I would say that among the teachers that were there in the facility that I was teaching in, there were like 4 or 5 of us. I was the one who was most comfortable being an authority in the classroom, like setting down the rules of what was appropriate behavior, what you wouldn't do, what your kids will and won't do, all of that kind of stuff I was quite comfortable with. But I think that you know, teaching is a very relational type of work. I mean, you're essentially, at least when you're doing the kind of teaching I was, the English as a second language, you're in relationship, and with adults, by the way, with other adults. And adults will grant you authority or power in a way that young people won't. When, you know, young people will challenge you. And so I will say that being in that teaching situation with other adults and in a very relational situation in terms of the type of teaching it was, the language teaching, you're almost constantly in relationship with the students when you're doing that. That is in fact separate from, say, being a manager in an organization or having employees. That's, to me, that's a very different relationship than having employees and being an authority in that way, or being an authority in the way that, you know, like you're, I don't know, that setting, you're in it when you're in a position that others are coming to you to have answers other than very basic, or what I would consider basic or natural. I'm just trying to think of, you know, whether there's just so many, now that I think about it, there's so many different ways to be an authority. So there's also the being an authority in the sense of having knowledge. being an authority on something. I'm not sure that that would overwhelm me. If anything, this card for that, for being an authority on something, would represent the fact that I don't feel like I have become an authority on anything in my life, and maybe have regrets about that, because my good old Gemini ascendant led me to be fascinated by a variety of things. So I'm not somebody who has like spent 20 years dedicated to one thing. Yeah. And I do have some regrets about that. I don't think it's quite as dramatic as the Five of Cups, but I do have some regrets about that. Just because I think that that would give a person a lot of sense of satisfaction. Not because it was ever particularly a goal, or even that I have some idea of what I would have done with that. I'm not sure. But I think it just would give a person a sense of satisfaction in life as they got older, to know that they had been involved with something for a really long span of time. But I've realized that way too late. I won't say way too late. I've still got some years left. But yeah, so this is an interesting investigation, and I don't know that anybody else will find it interesting. But I think it was worthwhile for me, and I'm glad I used both decks. They both gave kind of really different perspectives. And I needed to get this deck. I needed to get both of them out. I don't use either of them very much, so it was a nice excuse to get out some decks that I don't use very much and get some messages from them. So kudos as always to anybody who has stayed with me this long. Thank you so much. Feel free to leave comments. If you see something in the cards that I'm not seeing or want to interpret them a little differently, since this is an exploration, I'm certainly open to hearing those ideas. And I'll be back again soon. Bye-bye.